Hello, in this video I'm going to be fertilizing the yard. Well, I'm Ben and this is a DIY home front. And the other day I swept the yard and then I used the aerator and punched a bunch of holes in it. But now it's time to get that fertilizer on the yard. So let's see what I do and how I get it done. Well, this isn't moving very freely. So it looks like the first thing we're going to do in this fertilizing video is fix the fertilizer. I need to get some air in the tires. And I need to lubricate this so that spins a lot freer than it is. So let's go get some tools. I don't even know if these tires will hold air. We'll just have to try and see. Fortunately, the fertilizer is not that heavy, and maybe even without air in the tires, they won't be totally collapsed. I'm sure it's a generalization, but from my experience, these little tiny tires with the tubes in them never hold air and are just crappy. But at any rate, we'll look at the side of the tire and it looks like it says 30 psi maximum. So I'll set the air compressor for 15 pounds and then we'll just give the tire a good squeeze and see if that's enough. Well, these little portable air compressors make a huge difference. The first one I ever had was a small Craftsman that was in the shape of a drill, but after several years it finally died. And I went ahead and spent the extra money and got this DeWalt air compressor. And it is a really good air compressor. Well, the small tires don't take long to fill up, do they? That one's nice and hard. Well, if you want to keep up with me and all the different things I do on the home front, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I've gotten to where I really like this. Extremely easy to use. All you have to do is turn it on, choose whatever tire pressure you want, and hit the go button, and then the air compressor kicks on, and whatever you had it set for, it automatically inflates the tire to that pressure. And if you like saving money, the DeWalt air compressor uses the same battery as all their other hand tools, which means you don't have to buy a battery when you get the air compressor. Something else I like about it is you actually screw this onto the threads of the tire. So you know you have a good contact and you don't have to worry about it coming out while you're filling up with air. All right, step one, we have air in the tires. I'm using a penetrating oil that also helps break down rust, but it's really good at getting in all those hard to reach spots. The main goal is just to make sure I free everything up and it doesn't bind in any way, because as soon as I pull it with the lawnmower, it's going to get loosened up. That should take care of those two problems. Let's see exactly how this spreader works. Now most of these have a little handle that you can put back and forth that ends up just controlling a little part that opens and shuts. When you're filling it up with fertilizer, you want to make sure you have it closed. And when you start fertilizing, you want to open it up slowly so it just doesn't dump out on the ground. I normally do that once I'm moving. This particular unit has this little piece that you could slide back and forth. So when you find the spot that works best for you in your yard, you can just open it to the position that it's set. All right, it's time to fertilizer. Make sure that's closed. Now, if you're like me and you end up with hands that have little boogers in them, cuts and stuff like that, you might want to put on some gloves, because you'll be surprised how much it hurts to have fertilizer in open cuts. So I'm going to put on some gloves that I just need on long enough to get the fertilizer in the hopper. So now I got gloves and a fresh knife. Now this little device in the very bottom is going to end up spinning. And that's going to help agitate the fertilizer, but you want to make sure that there's no clump bigger than the opening that the fertilizer is supposed to go through, or it's just going to clog up. This stuff is like a brick. It's over a year old. If you want to know what kind of fertilizer you should be using, you should probably get your soil tested. And if you've got a very large yard like I do that's 3 acres, you might want to get more than one part of your yard tested, because the needs of the soil in our front yard is much different than the needs of our soil in our backyard. fertilizer has gone up in price quite a bit over the last couple of years. I think we're averaging about $75 a bag. And the last time we bought it, it was on sale. So we bought like 8 bags of fertilizer. So this was left over from last year. And over time, the moisture in our area gets into the bags and the fertilizer will end up clumping together. And it won't go through that little trap at the bottom and get spread out with those clumps. So you're going to have to break all those clumps up, which is exactly the reason why I'm wearing these gloves. Because that fertilizer just gets in and burns any cuts that you've got in your skin, and that's not good for your skin at all. So wear the gloves and think of safety first. Now this has got some really big granules, a lot larger than the one I normally have, which is the weed and feed. Well, if you've never used a fertilizer, let me tell you what's going to happen. The hopper dumps and it falls onto this device that's going to be spinning because of the tires, and it's going to knock that fertilizer out into a pattern that's probably about 5 or 6 feet. And the faster you go, the faster that's going to spin, and the more it's going to fling everything out in every direction. The slower you go, the less it's going to spin, and the more it's just going to drop right underneath the spreader. I normally go as fast as my mower will go to try to cover as much area as possible. And one reason why I'm saying that is you would never want to be this close to something, because you're going to get fertilizer all on there. And that's just going to make the grass and the weeds grow where you don't want it. So you're going to want to end up being over here, so that the very edge of where it's spreading is going to be right to the edge of where you want to go. It takes a lot more practice and skill than it looks like, and I'm not saying I'm good at it. I just know it takes a lot of practice and skill. And unfortunately, every different type of fertilizer you use spreads different, and every spreader you use spreads different. Well, normally there's one last thing I do before I end up fertilizing. Well, it's easy to see how there's some leaves on the ground, and of course, how we've got this pretty bed underneath the trees. But what I end up doing is I end up with a little channel where there's no grass at all around the beds. And what I do before I fertilize or cut the grass is I take my blower and I blow everything away from them. Well, I am sorry, the color's a little bit off, but I filmed this on a different day. But I really wanted to include it because it's one of the steps I go through whenever I'm fertilizing or cutting the grass. And as long as I'm at it, I also probably should remind you that although my videos are labeled how to, maybe they should say how I. Because this is how I do everything. It may not be perfect, but this is how I do it, and hopefully you can do it too. And what it does is it gives me a nice, clean, sharp edge around the beds. And if I'm bringing the fertilizer out and I get some towards the bed, I always come back with the blower and blow it again and blow all the fertilizer out, because I don't want to fertilize that area. I want to fertilize the grass, and then I want a sandy strip with no grass, and then my beds. Let me finish getting the back real quick. It's an extra step that probably takes about 15 minutes, but it's something I do around all the beds. Well, I always start back here behind the barn because this is the least used part of our yard. So if I mess up, it's going to be the least noticed, as opposed to the nice grassy area between the garden and the house. That's where I want to do the best job I can, because that's where we're going to spend most of our time. Well, let's start it up and see where we go. So my process is to find that spot in the yard that could use the most fertilizer, and then I will start there and I will adjust the spreader, and once I'm happy with how far it's slinging the fertilizer out, then I'll just go through and do the rest of the yard. Here's the hopper, and you can see how that little paddle inside agitates the fertilizer and how it just slowly empties out from the bottom. Even though I've had these bags of fertilizer as long as the other bags, it's a different brand and a different type of fertilizer. And it doesn't seem to clump up, and it doesn't seem to hold moisture the same way as the other fertilizer or the Scott's weed and feed fertilizer does. It looks like it's going to take 2 bags to fill this hopper up. Now I will fill the hopper on the spreader up with as much fertilizer as I can, because the hardest part is figuring out how much you want to come out And that really means just figuring out where that metal plate in the bottom of the hopper needs to be positioned. But at any rate, once you have that set, you don't want to stop and have to reload, because every time you do, that's a point where you might end up changing that setting, and then you end up changing the amount of fertilizer that's getting onto the grass. Now I'm going to turn this back, because this is going to come out a lot differently than the other stuff did. Now I'll put the camera up on top of the roof, and probably not as much because I want you to see everything I'm doing, but because you can see where I go. And then in a couple weeks I'll put another episode out where we go back and look, and you'll probably be able to see direct lines of where I went and where I missed. It gets really obvious sometimes. You'll have green spots, and then you'll have spots you missed. Well, climbing up a ladder and onto your roof can be dangerous, so if you choose to do something like I'm doing, please be careful. Well, this is me about 2 weeks ago, and it's right after I used the aerator and poked a bunch of holes in the yard and went all around with the fertilizer behind the lawnmower and tried to cover as much as I can. Now, I don't know if you're better than I am, but it's really hard to tell where you've been and where you haven't been from the ground. But it's a lot easier from up here on the roof to see where the grass is green and where it isn't. And normally where the grass isn't that green, I didn't get fertilizer there very well. But I'm going to go ahead and get down there, and I'm going to fertilize the yard again. But I just really wanted you to be able to see what it looks like between 2 weeks of I haven't fertilized at all, and now there's fertilizer on my yard. Alright, well, here's that final video of the yard. It's been about 2 weeks since I fertilized, and it's probably been 4 days since we had a good rain. So the fertilizers had a chance to sort of wash into the ground, or wash into all those holes we put. But it really looks good. There's still a couple of brown spots, but when I do the comparison photo, they're not nearly as bad. And we still have some light areas over here where the grass just really isn't that thick, but it's always been that way. I don't know why our front yard just seems to be so much sandier than the backyard. I don't know if it's because we drive the cars on the grass, but at any rate, it never has looked as good. And we try to make it look okay, but we're not that worried about the front yard because we spend all of our time in the backyard. Well, there you have it. Now you know how I fertilize my yard. I will probably do this maybe 3 or 4 times over the summer. Like I said, with the cost of fertilizer and the size of my yard, we only do it when it really needs it. Well, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in that next video.